The two leaders, their foreign ministers and other government members, as well as senior officials, covered a range of issues and talks which overran their scheduled time and went on for more than an hour. The agenda touched on international affairs, nuclear disarmament, the Middle East and Ireland's role with the UN force in Lebanon, Soviet-Irish trade and cultural links, and Northern Ireland. At a joint news conference, Mr Haughey described the talks as stimulating, and he announced that one result would be a ministerial mission to Moscow.
We have agreed that on a number of issues of bilateral importance, that these will be followed up at official and ministerial level, and that in particular a delegation of Irish ministers will travel to Moscow to pursue further detailed negotiations and discussions on a number of the issues that we have raised.
Mr Gorbachev, through his interpreter, described the talks as substantive and said they would lead to a greater mutual understanding.
I believe that the constructive thrust and the good atmosphere of these talks have moved the Soviet-Irish political dialogue to a higher level.
The Soviet leader was briefed by Mr Haughey on Northern Ireland, and he gave journalists something of his thinking on the problem. It had a human dimension, he said, and the Soviet government responded to that.
We are sympathetic to efforts to resolve that problem, in a way consistent with the feelings of the people of Northern Ireland. So it is for the Irish people to address that problem. On the other hand, we leave that problem to the government of Great Britain to discuss. We did not have any practical discussion of the problem itself in these negotiations. On the other hand, there is a human dimension, a human aspect to that problem, which was mentioned.
Later, I talked with Mr Haughey about the ministerial mission to Moscow and the prospects for increased trade with Russia.
Perestroika will need a great deal of input from the outside of the Soviet Union to make it work effectively. We want to be in a position to supply the Soviet Union with a number of things to help Perestroika succeed, a number of services which we can supply, a number of goods which we can supply to them, and indeed perhaps a number of techniques which we can make available to them.
The Taoiseach referred to Mr Gorbachev's knowledge of Northern Ireland, but was there a role for the Soviet Union in the attempts to find a solution?
Well, of course there is, because just the same as the United States can play a role, the more friends we have around the world who take an interest in it, who see it, as President Gorbachev does, as a great human tragic problem, and who would be anxious to be morally supportive from the outside. The more of that, the better from our point of view.
Finally, Mr Haughey said he had mentioned the possibility of any future East-West summit meeting being held in Ireland, and Mr Gorbachev had replied, of course, why not?